It is 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. The super-strength drug manufactured on a Mexican hillside now fueling an opioid epidemic. We'll have exclusive access to an illegal fentanyl lab.
The most important people in this whole process are, of course, the men who make the fentanyl. They call themselves the cooks. The end of the third process is pure fentanyl.
Also tonight, tears in the witness box. The nurse accused of murdering 7 babies says it's sickening to be blamed for their deaths. Police carry out a controlled explosion outside Buckingham Palace and arrest a man found carrying a suspicious bag. A 5% pay rise for 1 million NHS staff in England, but doctors and nurses could still go on strike. Plus, a fairy tale ending. Players, fans and Hollywood owners celebrate Wrexham's return to the English Football League. We'll have a first look at tomorrow's front pages too in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. It's a drug 50 times more powerful than heroin, which has become a multi-million-dollar business and spawned a new wave in America's opioid epidemic. High up in the mountains of northwest Mexico, Sky News has witnessed firsthand how one drug cartel manufactures super-strength fentanyl using chemicals smuggled from China. The Sinaloa cartel runs dozens of illegal drug factories manufacturing pure product, transported, one gang boss tells us, in all directions, including to the United States, where in 2021, more than 70,600 people died of overdoses involving synthetic opioids, mostly fentanyl. That is 19 times higher than the number of deaths in 2013. Now, fentanyl mostly is made in Mexico and is trafficked directly into the United States and then distributed worldwide. Sky News gained exclusive access to the main trafficking gang and followed them as they made the drug and transported it to the Mexican border. From the city of Coronation in northwest Mexico, our chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsay, sent us this.
From a small village on Mexico's Pacific coast, fishing boats with powerful engines speed through estuaries leading to the ocean. It's early evening, but they move before dark. On board are members of the Sinaloa drug cartel, one of the most powerful in Mexico. They're heading to a rendezvous point to pick up a shipment the cartel says has been smuggled here from China. On an islet in water too shallow for Mexico's security forces to use their vessels, a man helps load plastic jerry cans filled with chemicals known as precursors. They are the crucial ingredients that make the opioid drug fentanyl. This is the first part of a process that makes the cartel millions of dollars, but fuels an opioid epidemic that's killing thousands of drug users in the United States. They move quickly. Mexican Marines are always near, and drones are a constant threat. They head to shore. The chemicals are loaded into a car to be whisked away to a safe house. Directions are given to us to join the gang later that night. The back streets of Culiacan, the Sinaloa cartel's headquarters, are controlled by cartel gunmen. We're watched constantly as we drive to the stash house. The precursors are already here. This is one of the cartel's most senior players. He's in charge of distributing the precursors to the fentanyl-making labs. This one consignment, he told me, can make 1/2 ton of the drug. They do this every week.
Todo lo que aquí se procesa se manda para Estados Unidos o se manda para Australia, España, para Qatar, para nivel mundial, Rusia, Inglaterra, para toda parte del mundo, Asia, para todos lados.
The fentanyl labs are spread across the state of Sinaloa, in towns, villages and the countryside. We're guided up a remote hillside. Hidden beneath trees and tarpaulin sheets is a lab where the synthetic opioid drug is made. It's highly toxic. Even breathing in the fumes here is lethal. It's going to take a few hours to make pure fentanyl. The two gang members who create the drug leave their guns on a tree branch as they work through 3 processes. Essentially, they're adding the Chinese precursors, acid, and a variety of other chemicals they won't reveal to us, to make a porridge-like mash that is then re-diluted and mixed again. They have no qualms about making this lethal cocktail.
America says that people like yourself are on a wanted list because so many people are dying in America because of fentanyl. Do you care about that?
Each part of the process concludes with a centrifuge removing the water as they get nearer to the end.
The most important people in this whole process are, of course, the men who make the fentanyl. They call themselves the cooks. And in fact, they actually pay others to teach them how to do it. It's very much like a professional chef. They don't do it just by time. They do it by how it looks, what it feels like, if you like. And that's how they know when it's each process, and there's 3 processes, that's when they know that it's done. Of course, at the end of the 3rd process, it's pure fentanyl.
There is a constant mixing, stirring and drying of the product in and out of sheets and bags before they're finally happy and indicate they are done. They never take off their gloves, respirators or aprons. The pure fentanyl is emptied into a bowl. They break it into pieces and move it into the sun to start drying. At another location, the now dry fentanyl is ground into powder in a smoothie maker. The drug is carefully weighed to a single kilo and loaded into a plastic bag and then completely wrapped in thick tape. This consignment will join another batch of kilo bags and is destined for the United States. It's placed in a secret locked compartment the cartel has installed in a pickup. The journey north now begins. Its destination, Tijuana, on the United States border. Once here, the drugs are swapped into a car with American number plates. It then joins the traffic that continuously crosses between the 2 countries. In America, dealers will cut the fentanyl. 1 kilo can quickly become 10, and the profits multiply. If the demand is there, this deadly trade seems unstoppable.
Well, today, after a global operation, the US Department of Justice said that 300 people were arrested for trafficking drugs, including 64 kilos of fentanyl on the dark web. Now, Stuart is in Tijuana for us tonight. And Stuart, more than 150 of those arrests were made in the US, the tentacles of the operation that you witnessed spanning continents and communities.
Yeah, I think that's really the point, isn't it? With cartels, they're extremely well organised. In the past, they've said to me they can pretty much deliver anything overnight, certainly to the United States, but can go further afield as well. And you saw in that report, they were saying that they can get drugs, particularly fentanyl, to the UK and to Australia. It is a huge network. Obviously, it's headquartered in Mexico, but it has people and it has partners who aren't necessarily part of the cartel, but part of the crime network, and it is really global. And I think what's interesting is, even though they make a lot of arrests, and some of those arrests are very high profile, the fact is that the cartels continue to operate because another leader takes over and the business just goes on.
OK, Stuart, thank you for that. And Stuart's report is just the first in a series of special reports this week that we're calling Fighting Fentanyl. Now, earlier this year, from the streets of Philadelphia, we brought you the stories of those who are addicted to the drug, here combined with an animal tranquilizer. The White House has designated that cocktail, which rots the skin of those who use it, as an emerging threat to the nation. And then tomorrow, we're in Texas, where we'll show you another devastating side of the drug epidemic, the impact on school children and families.
We lost our daughter Miley on February 17th of this year.
You don't believe it could happen to you, and here we are, and it truly could happen to anybody.
It was at home. She had taken something during the night, and we found her the next morning. She had passed away. To this day, we don't know exactly what she took. We know that it was laced with fentanyl.
Well, join us tomorrow for a special programme including eyewitness reporting from Mexico and across the US border in Texas and California. That is Fighting Fentanyl at 7 o'clock tomorrow night here on Sky News. Now, a nurse accused of killing 7 babies and attempting to murder 10 infants gave evidence in court for the first time today and insisted that she only did her best to care for them. With the parents of her alleged victims looking on, Lucy Letby cried in the witness box as she repeatedly denied harming the young patients in her care. Our national correspondent, Tom Parminter, reports.
It was the very youngest patients at the Countess of Chester Hospital that Lucy Letby cared for. She treated each of the 7 newborns who died in suspicious circumstances there in 2015 and 2016. 5 years into her career as a nurse, Lucy Letby was accused of murder. She told the court, "I don't think you can be accused of anything worse than that. My job was my life." She broke down in tears at this point and added, "My whole world just stopped." In deciding to give evidence herself, Lucy Letby has chosen to directly confront the allegations that she murdered babies in her care. She was asked 7 times in a row whether or not she'd harmed them. Her defence team asked her, "Have you ever tried to kill any baby you've cared for?" No. Have you ever intentionally harmed or tried to intentionally harm any of the babies as alleged? No, never. Have you ever introduced air intravenously or forced air down a nasogastric tube? No, I haven't. Have you done that for the intention of killing a baby or for any other reason? No. Her denials kept coming. She said she'd never assaulted babies, never overfed them, and never poisoned them with insulin. She described how upsetting it was when a baby died on the unit. To try and process it, she would often write down notes. In one, she wrote the words, "I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough." But Lucy Letby said her mental state was not good at all when she wrote it. She said it was just her processing her thoughts. She will continue to be questioned on Friday and denies all the charges she faces. Tom Parminter, Sky News, Manchester.
Now, police in London carried out a controlled explosion outside Buckingham Palace tonight and have arrested a man on suspicion of possessing an offensive weapon. Ashna Horinag is in central London for us outside Buckingham Palace and joins us now. Ashna?
It was around 7 p.m. Tonight, Kamali, in which a man is understood to have approached the gates of Buckingham Palace behind me and thrown a number of items onto the palace grounds. Those suspicious items are believed to be shotgun cartridges. He was detained very quickly by Metropolitan Police officers who have been in the vicinity of Buckingham Palace for days now and consistently monitor the area. He was immediately arrested. He was also found to be in possession of a suspicious bag, say Scotland Yard. A precautionary controlled explosion on that bag was then done by the Metropolitan Police. But there is an enormous cordon, it must be said, around the palace grounds behind me, hence why it is so quiet at the moment. There are military rehearsals going on through the night. But this incident, understandably, has heightened tensions, but it gives you a sense of how, I suppose, immediate the actions were of the police with how important such an event is. It's worth saying that this is not being treated as a terror offence and there have been no injuries to officers or members of the public reported, but that man has indeed been arrested on suspicion of possessing an offensive weapon and he has been taken to custody.
Ashna, thank you for that. Now, before the incident, the King and Queen Consort visited Parliament to meet some politicians ahead of Saturday's coronation. Rehearsals are continuing tonight in central London with thousands of troops taking part. Our royal correspondent, Laura Bundock, reports.
There was a time when a new monarch came to Westminster Hall for their coronation banquet, complete with knight in armour. Today it's just handshakes and a cup of tea, and most here aren't invited on Saturday.
I've got to say, look, this was amazing, isn't it? The King came to Parliament and Parliament came out for the King. And I've got to say, the sheer numbers, staff, members of Parliament, peers, we were all here. Everybody wanted to be part of the coronation, and this was his gift to Parliament by saying, I welcome me all, and he did.
The King in good spirits with just days to go before his coronation.
Take care. Enjoy Saturday.
But still plenty more preparation, especially for the Archbishop of Canterbury, who's leading the service and will crown the King.
I'm very conscious of what a huge privilege it is to do it. And we've been doing lots of rehearsals since February and, you know, it's slowly coming together.
Also coming together, visiting foreign leaders as they're met by the King. From his own family, a rare insight with the Princess Royal in interview, discussing the monarchy's relevance.
I think it's perfectly true that it is a moment where you need to have that discussion. But I would just underline that the monarchy provides, with the Constitution, a degree of long-term stability that is actually quite hard to come by any other way.
And as for slimming things down...
Well, I think the slim down was said in a day when there were a few more people around to make that seem like a justifiable comment.
The world changes a bit.
It changes a bit. I mean, it doesn't sound like a good idea from where I'm standing, I have to say.
Princess Anne has an honorary role at the coronation procession. And to that, she'll be joined by thousands of troops who are now making their way into London. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
Now, more than 1 million NHS staff in England are going to receive a 5% pay rise as soon as next month. The deal was signed off at a meeting between the government and 14 health unions representing all NHS staff except for doctors and dentists. Speaking afterwards, the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, said it was time to end the strikes, but doctors and nurses could still walk out. Our health correspondent, Ashish Joshi, explains why.
After 6 months of picket lines and hundreds of thousands of cancelled operations and appointments, finally, an agreement on a pay deal for NHS workers.
So I'm pleased that the majority of health unions, that members accepted the recommendations we made, that it was the best alternative to waiting for the pay review body process to run out for this year. The hope is that lessons have been learned about the value of listening to NHS staff.
The deal means more than 1 million NHS staff will get a 5% increase and a lump sum, possibly as soon as June. But unions are divided. Unite and the Royal College of Nursing will re-ballot members, like Mark, over further strike action.
I can't, go to the students who I train and say, yeah, I think you're going to have a well-paid profession and a good career ahead of you based on this pay deal. And it was just going to create more anger. The way the government have handled this, imposing it on people, not reopening negotiations, it's just made people more angry and frustrated.
But the government says the matter is now settled.
This was a decision taken by 14 health unions. They reached a majority decision. It was negotiated collectively. The RCN were at the negotiating table. Indeed, Pat Cullen recommended this deal to her own members. So it's important that everyone now respects the decision.
As far as most of the health unions are concerned, their pay dispute with the government is now over. There are some difficult questions ahead for the RCN and Unite. And the government will see this breakthrough as proof that it can negotiate a deal with the junior doctors. A pay deal reached, but long-term issues remaining, including a record patient waiting list and still no workforce plan to address the crisis in the recruitment and retention of NHS staff. Ashish Joshi, Sky News in central London.
Now, for the first time in more than 40 years, campaigners who say their babies were harmed by the pregnancy drug Primodos are returned to the High Court. Over 100 claimants are looking to rekindle their case against the drugs manufacturers after their first attempt collapsed in the early 1980s. Among them, the fiancé of one man who died before getting his day in court. Our home editor, Jason Farrell, has this.
Jamie Hosmer was 12 when his parents went to the High Court, claiming his heart problems were caused by a drug his mother took while pregnant. 40 years later, in November last year, he died of heart complications. His parents are dead too. So his only representative, when the case returned to court today, was his fiancée.
Last year, yeah, he passed away on the 3rd of November, and 100% I believe it was because of Primodos. He would still be here.
The alarm about this drug was first raised by scientist Isabel Gall in 1967. Her research in Nature magazine suggested a higher number of babies with spinal defects had been born to women who used the pregnancy test drug Primodos. But the drug remained on the market for years until further studies pointed to a link with other abnormalities in the fetus. And a warning appeared on the packet in 1975 saying Primodos must not be taken unless it's certain the patient is not pregnant.
We have been campaigning since 1978.
Mary Lyon, a mother who used Primodos, has fought for decades for recognition that hundreds of children were damaged by the drug. And in 2019, victims gave evidence to a review.
I still had problems with my hearing. I had no sight in my left eye.
The independent review concluded that Primodos had caused avoidable harm to people like Nikki. Government regulators failed to act on warnings, and it recommended redress be paid to the victims.
I want to issue a full apology to those who've suffered and their families.
But 3 years on, the government's legal team is side by side with that of the manufacturer, who told the court today the claimant's case is bound to fail and therefore should be struck out.
Matt Hancock, you know, how on earth he kept his face straight when he said it, I really don't know, because he didn't mean a word. And that was quite apparent, because when we asked about it later on, the answer was, well, we're actually just apologising because you've been damaged, but we didn't accept responsibility. Right. So what was that about?
So what was that about?
Well, there is a court case on that, so it's important that one allows the legal process to follow its course. So you wouldn't expect ministers to comment on issues that are before the court.
The manufacturers Shearing, now owned by Bayer, say the legal challenge in 1982 failed and the science hasn't changed since. In 2017, an expert working group found no new evidence of a causal association. They deny that their drug affected these lives. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Now, the president of FIFA is threatening to stop a number of European countries from watching this year's Women's World Cup. Gianni Infantino said that the current offers from broadcasters for the rights to the games were disappointing and described them as a slap in the face of all great players and all women worldwide. The World Cup is going to take place in Australia and New Zealand in 7 weeks' time, with most games being shown in the morning here in the UK. The government has announced it will run additional evacuation flights tomorrow for people looking to escape the violence in Sudan. People wanting to leave have been told to arrive at Port Sudan by 10 a.m. in order to be processed. The pastor of a religious cult in Kenya has been rearrested minutes after the country's lower court released him and closed the case against him. Paul Mackenzie is accused of inciting his followers to starve to death in order to meet Jesus. Officials say that the number of deaths linked to the cult has risen to 110. Hollywood writers closed their laptops and headed to the picket lines today in the first walkout for more than 15 years. It means that popular late-night talk shows could go dark, maybe even tonight, as screenwriters demand fairer pay and an assurance that their roles won't be replaced by AI chatbots. Our US correspondent James Matthews says this.
In screen entertainment, it's no laughing matter.
There's one big story.
The talk on the chat shows is the strike of the scriptwriters.
These are our writers.
Their scriptwriter.
These people, without these people, this show would be called The Late Show with a guy rambling about the Lord of the Rings and boats for an hour.
Action!
The people who write the material for America's TV and film industry have walked out in a pay dispute, bringing a halt to production.
Get up! Get down! New York is a union town!
Writers say that while streaming has created more content and jobs, they're being paid less. And they're concerned about artificial intelligence being used to write scripts in future.
Everyone's concerned about AI, and we all want to live in a world where people have jobs. And if they hire AI, give an AI computer the ability to write a first draft, that's a writer losing a major amount of their income writing a feature film.
Oh, I know. It's the White House.
No, it's the Capitol.
Here, the entertainment industry has learned through experience the cost of strife with its scriptwriters.
I brought you one.
You did?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now throw it away. Does Leslie Knope is your guidebook? I didn't...
It's not the first time the script's been written. America's writers went on strike in 2007. It took programming off the air and cost the California economy more than $2 billion.
If successful, he will be the oldest man. That's it, just the oldest man.
TV chat shows that rely on same-day script writing are already being cancelled. They are the first screen casualties of the writer's block. They may not be the last. James Matthews, Sky News, in Washington.
Well, now to a football fairy tale, a struggling team, new Hollywood buyers and promotion to the English Football League. Today, players and fans of Wrexham basked in their own success as they paraded their trophy. But if their owners are to be believed, this is just the first step on the road to the Premier League. Shingi Marike reports.
This is what happens when Stardust meets a passionate fan base who have waited 15 years to return to the Football League. Wrexham's promotion parade gave the community a chance to celebrate their heroes, packing the streets with streaks of red and white.
I've been watching them years in non-league. You get all these good players and bigger teams take them. We've got a bigger budget now, we can keep the good players. We've got to work our way up slowly, enjoy the process.
That was unbelievable. It's one of the best experiences of my life. Wrexham all the way through. Come on. What these two guys have done to the team and the town, absolutely brilliant.
Since the 2021 takeover by stars Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, this team has found investment and an international fan base. A story straight from a motion picture. The Hollywood owners were here today to drink it all in.
Wrexham's newfound success isn't just about the team, but the community around the club. It's brought international attention to a local team in this corner of North Wales.
Attention that has seen benefits for local businesses.
Wrexham doesn't stand alone, for towns that, have economically struggled in the last decade or so. Austerity's kicked in Wrexham in parts, and it's been a bit of a struggle. But what this does do is it brings people into the town. It gets people spending. It gets businesses earning a little bit more, which creates jobs, and everybody knows the knock-on effect from that.
They don't want to stop here. The dream is to one day compete in the Premier League. That might seem far away, but fans here and around the world are hoping their team's Hollywood revival has only just begun. Shingi Marike, Sky News, Wrexham.